Donald Trump's campaign to prosecute his political enemies, what could be a watershed moment for our democracy, is reaching a fever pitch, with an indictment against former FBI Director James Comey expected as soon as today. As for the president driving us towards that watershed moment, here's what he had to say about his former FBI director just today.
I can't tell you what's going to happen because I don't know. You have very professional people headed up by the Attorney General and Todd Blanche and Lindsay Halligan, who's very smart, good lawyer, very good lawyer. They're going to make a determination. I'm not making that determination. I think I'd be allowed to get involved if I want, but I don't really choose to do so. I can only say that Comey's a bad person. He's a sick person. I think he's a sick guy, actually. He did terrible things at the FBI. But I don't know. I have no idea what's going to happen.
Trump's claim to not be involved in a criminal case against one of his most prominent critics, well, that does not square up with this reporting from the Wall Street Journal. Quote, Trump has pushed Bondi repeatedly in private in recent days to bring charges against Comey, even as she has expressed reservations about the case. And she's not alone. At all levels of the Justice Department, there is reportedly a sense that there is simply no there. MSNBC reporting this, quote, the Justice Department's plan to indict James Comey encountered a last-minute roadblock earlier this week when line prosecutors presented President Trump's newly installed U.S. attorney in the Eastern District of Virginia with a memo suggesting their case against the former FBI director is too weak to pursue. Two sources familiar with the case said the memo explained why prosecutors lack sufficient evidence to convince a grand jury to indict Comey. But U.S. Attorney Lindsay Halligan can overrule their recommendation. Halligan, who has never prosecuted a case in her entire career, she was an insurance lawyer and Trump's defense lawyer, is, quote, rushing against the clock before the statute of limitations involving one charge believed to be central to the case expires within the week. That charge, allegations that the former FBI director lied to Congress about whether he authorized a leak of information to the media. Here's the exchange with Senator Ted Cruz that is apparently at issue.
Chairman Grassley asked you point blank, quote, have you ever been an anonymous source in news reports about matters relating to the Trump investigation or the Clinton investigation? You responded under oath, quote, never. Now, as you know, Mr. McCabe, who works for you, has publicly and repeatedly stated that he leaked information to the Wall Street Journal and that you were directly aware of it and that you directly authorized it. Who's telling the truth?
I can only speak to my testimony. I stand by what the testimony you summarized that I gave in May of 2017.
So your testimony is you've never authorized anyone to leak. And Mr. McCabe, if he says contrary, is not telling the truth. Is that correct?
Again, I'm not going to characterize Andy's testimony, but mine is the same today.
Okay, so the question of whether or not Comey lied right there has already been investigated. According to MSNBC's reporting, quote, an independent investigation by the Justice Department Inspector General concluded that Comey did not authorize the release of the information and that FBI rules allowed McCabe, as deputy director, to speak to the news media without authorization. The Justice Department reportedly barreling ahead with an indictment of one of President Trump's political critics is where we start today. Ken Delaney, Justice and Intelligence correspondent for MSNBC, White House correspondent for the New York Times, author of 2024, Tyler Pager is with us, plus former Department of Justice pardon attorney Liz Oyer, who was fired by Trump's Justice Department back in March. It is good to see you all. Ken, you and our colleague Carol Leonnig, you were the first to report on this. What is the latest?
Good afternoon, Alicia. Yeah, we believe that the U.S. Attorney, Lindsay Halligan, is moving forward with the case, despite that memo that she received recommending that she not do so. And again, that memo said that not only do these lawyers think they can't win the case and convince a jury beyond a reasonable doubt that James Comey is guilty of lying to Congress, they don't even believe there's probable cause, which is the lower standard by which you obtain an indictment. Although the Justice Department rules, the ethical rules, say that a prosecutor should believe they could win a conviction if they even seek an indictment. But we think they're moving forward. We believe the grand jury is sitting today. They may be presenting to the grand jury today. We're waiting to see what happens here. And look, I mean, you laid it out really well. There was a saying in Stalinist Russia, find me the man and I'll show you the crime. And that's really, that looks like what's happening here. I mean, this was James Comey and his conduct in the Russia investigation was scrutinized by a different Trump-appointed prosecutor, John Durham, the special counsel, who looked at everything and didn't charge Comey, or very few other people actually, didn't even criticize Comey in terms of his candor to Congress in his final report. And this issue with the divergence between Comey's account and McCabe's account on this particular leak to the Wall Street Journal, this has been around for years. 5 years ago, actually, is when he delivered that testimony. That's why the statute of limitations lapses early next week. Just because there's a disagreement over what happened, that doesn't make it perjury. In order to make a perjury charge, you have to show evidence that James Comey intended to deceive Congress, that he knew he was lying, that he had criminal intent. And I'm not aware of any evidence of that. And it appears that career prosecutors inside the Eastern District of Virginia didn't think there was enough evidence of that either. But of course, Donald Trump has been pushing Pam Bondi. He did it publicly on Truth Social to indict not only James Comey, but Letitia James, the New York Attorney General, and Adam Schiff, the senator from California. And it looks like the machinery of justice is doing his bidding. And that is a place we have not been before as a country, particularly since Watergate. But even before that, the idea of a president ordering his Justice Department to charge his political enemies, whether they think there's evidence or not, that is a very dangerous place that we're in as a country right now, Alicia.
Liz, I agree that this does feel fundamentally different than even the long line of attacks against the system of justice that we have seen from this administration. I want to read you something from ABC News about those line prosecutors that Ken Dilanian was just talking about. They would argue that seeking the charges would violate DOJ policy, raise serious ethical issues, and risk being rejected by the grand jury. She plans to pursue an indictment anyway, carrying out the clear mandate she received when she was installed into the position over the weekend. But before we even talk about Lindsay Halligan and what this means for her and why she is there, if you are those career prosecutors and you have been making this case to your new boss that there is no there, that this cannot clear the lowest possible bar and standard of the Justice Department's own rules and regulations, and she says, I'm going to do it anyway, what does that say to you as a line prosecutor, and how much longer can you stay in that role in good faith?
I think people in the Justice Department now are in a very hard situation where they have to choose between fulfilling their duties to uphold the Constitution and follow the rules of the department and pleasing their boss. And for those folks, I hope that they choose to lead with integrity and not to let their principles and duties be compromised to achieve a political objective. Essentially, what's happening now is the longstanding practices of the Department of Justice are being turned on their head. Prosecutors are required to start with facts and evidence and pursue cases from there. It is quite the opposite to start with a target and then try to build a case around them, which is what they're being asked to do here. This is the type of thing that a lawyer could lose their law license over. So I hope that people are taking a long view of this within the Justice Department and intend to stand up for what's right and allow themselves to be fired or to quit if that's what it takes to avoid doing something that would be very destructive to our system of justice.
And Tyler, I want to remind us all, because there is such a wild history here, that this is not the first time we have seen this film. The New York Times reported back in 2018 that Trump told then White House counsel Don McGahn he wanted to order an investigation into Comey, but McGahn, quote, rebuffed the president, saying that he had no authority to order a prosecution. To underscore that point, Mr. McGahn had White House lawyers write a memo, yet another memo for Mr. Trump, warning that if he asked law enforcement to investigate his rivals, he could face a range of consequences, including possible impeachment. The difference now, Tyler, is there is no Don McGahn there.
Yeah, I mean, he is surrounded by loyalists in the White House and in the administration. And I think we've seen him take steps when he has encountered roadblocks for these larger objectives. He moves to replace those people with people who are willing to serve his purpose. And so I think we saw him, I mean, the Truth Social message he put out over the weekend where he said Pam, referring to the Attorney General, and very explicitly told her he wanted her to prosecute Comey, Letitia James. This is something we haven't seen as public before, right? My colleagues reported that he would say these things privately to his aides, but he has now dispensed with any sort of caution across the board. And we've seen that particularly play out as it relates to these specific individuals, what he perceives as his political opponents, that he wants his Justice Department to prosecute them. And so this wall that most presidents, at least since Watergate, have put up between the White House and the Justice Department has just fallen completely.
Ken, I wonder what your reporting is telling you about Pam Bondi and what those conversations with the president, where she has, quote, expressed reservations, actually look like, just how ardent she has been in those conversations, and what happens to Pam Bondi should her counsel be rejected and this move forward.
I can't claim to have perfect visibility on that score, Alicia, but I do know from reporting on the Justice Department that Pam Bondi and Todd Blanche, they're real lawyers. They have long experience in the practice of law. Todd Blanche was a prosecutor. Pam Bondi was the Florida Attorney General for 8 years. And they know the pitfalls here that Liz described. They understand the situation. And by all accounts, they tried to protect Eric Siebert, the U.S. attorney who was fired, who was Trump's pick, remember, to run that office. But he didn't want to bring these cases. And so essentially he was forced out. So they're not comfortable with this. But it's also very clear that Pam Bondi wants to keep her job and she wants to stay in Donald Trump's good graces. And I saw a photo last night of her dining with the president, smiling the other day. That's a photo that Merrick Garland would have done anything to avoid taking. He didn't even want to be in the same room with Joe Biden when the Justice Department was investigating Joe Biden's son, and when there was a special counsel reviewing whether Joe Biden mishandled classified documents. He tried to keep the Justice Department completely isolated from the Biden White House, despite the charges that Republicans were making. That's not how Pam Bondi's running this Justice Department. She's been very clear. She's a Trump loyalist. And so despite her misgivings, I don't envision her trying to, for example, put a stop to this indictment. If she does, that would be a new chapter in the Pam Bondi tenure as Attorney General.
Okay, but